Hello and welcome back to Alex FPL. Today we'll be reviewing my squad, going over the major news from the weekends, looking at how the new signings did, and going over the Game Week 1 heroes. Stick around to the end for the perfect Game Week 1 reaction. Starting in goal, we have Sanchez, who scored 7 points, kept a clean sheet for Chelsea, played really well. This is exactly why we have him in our teams. He's reliable, he's only 5 million, and we can expect lots more from him. Then we have Porro, 6 points, clean sheet for Tottenham, didn't get any attacking returns, but looked really, really lively. He was on all set pieces from the left, which we expected, so he was on corners. He even took some free kicks. He's definitely the asset we wanted him to be. Looks like a great hold, despite his difficult fixture next game week. Now, let's not forget that when Porro played City away last season, a lot of us transferred him out or benched him. He ended up getting something like 14 or 15 points. So maybe if you're forced to start him against City, it might not be the worst thing in the world. Next one is a bit of a heartbreaking one, but Nico Williams. Many of us had someone from Nottingham Forest in our back line, and unfortunately the clean sheet got wiped right at the very last minute. Doesn't do anything to change his appeal going forwards though. Clean sheets are definitely coming for Forest. Then we have Konza. I'm still struggling to understand how that happened. He was playing such a good game. Villa were absolutely on course to keep a clean sheet, which they in fact even kept with his sending off. I don't really understand what happened. He held on to the player went down, he got sent off as the last man. It was a tackle he didn't need to do. He had another colleague coming right up behind who would have made the tackle. He didn't need to do that. Really, really senseless. But this is FPL, and we'll take the silver linings where we can. He did stay on the field long enough to get the 4 points for a clean sheet. Of course, he was sent off, which was a -3, so that leaves us with a net 3 points for Konza. Of course, he won't be able to play next week, so we're benching Konza and we're bringing Esteve on, who's facing Sunderland. Next, the man who arguably saved our game weeks, Mo Salah with 8 points. Of course, those who captained him would have had 16 points. He had a pretty good game. He wasn't that involved in goal-scoring opportunities throughout the match, so I was getting a bit nervous. And then he pops up, as he always does, at the very last minute in the game with an amazing goal to seal the deal for Liverpool. And of course, get us those all-important FPL points. Now, Palmer. This is a player that many of us already knew was inconsistent at the end of last season and was playing slightly in positions that perhaps were not favouring him. Then we saw him in the Club World Cup. We all got hyped about him over the summer. We all brought him back into our teams. And now we're starting to see the same positions that Palmer was playing in for Chelsea towards the end of last season. He's in those positions again. He's not coming in off the wing, which is his favoured position and where he gets the most points, the most returns, the most attacking contributions. He's playing centrally, which arguably could mean that he's closer to the goal. But actually what's happening is he's getting involved very much so in the midfield play, which is great from a footballing perspective. But for FPL, we want Palmer closer to that goal. We want him cutting in from the wing. And based on the first game, that doesn't seem to be his tactical position under Maresca. Now, does this make Palmer an immediate sell? Of course not. Let's hold on to him. Let's see how he does, but let's monitor. I may move off Palmer in about 6 game weeks if I'm still seeing no adjustments to his position on the field. Now, as I alluded to in a previous video before the deadline, I knew that despite my best efforts, I was going to pivot back to Fernandes as I always do, or seem to do over the last few seasons before Game Week 1. Sure enough, he made it into my team, and just as I predicted, he didn't do anything. Now, to be fair, he was playing against Arsenal, so I don't think any of us were expecting him to haul. But what I was looking for is the eye test. He did not pass the eye test. Well, from an FPL perspective. From a footballing perspective, different story. But he is playing a central midfield role, which again we knew, but he wasn't really getting up the field. The ones that were hitting Arsenal on the counter were Cunha and Mbeumo over and over again. So does that mean Fernandes is a sell overnight? No. But again, similar to Palmer, I'd want to monitor, see if anything changes. If his position remains exactly the same and he's not really getting involved in the attacking contributions for Manchester United over, say, the next 4 to 6 game weeks, I will review whether he stays on my team. Next, we have Wirtz. So Wirtz was the biggest gamble. I said that in my last video. I knew that he wasn't going to be a assured source of FPL points, but I have to say, having watched the whole game, he was very disappointing. He looked like a player that wasn't ready for the Premier League. Now, obviously, he was incredible in the Bundesliga last year, but he just didn't seem ready for the physicality and the pace of the Premier League. I watched him, he was in that midfield, and to be fair, he was stringing some passes together, but his quickness of thought wasn't there. He wasn't doing those one-touch passes that are crucial to move the ball up the field really quickly. He wasn't getting in front of goal. He didn't really provide any big chances for his teammates. I'm very nervous about Verts having seen that first game. Of course, I don't recommend anyone does anything knee-jerk with him. Let's keep him in our teams for a while longer. But again, he's on the review list. Then we have Rangers. What an incredible return. I'm doing a special section on him next, so look out for that. Then we have Watkins. So very disappointing 2 points from Watkins. I did watch the game against Newcastle, and I have to say he seemed pretty invisible. Obviously, fair play to Newcastle. They did play really, really well. They had a very good defensive position on the pitch, which made it really difficult for Villa to break them down. So credit where it's due. However, I would have liked to see Watkins at least try a bit harder. Of course, it is game week 1. We're not making any rash decisions, and I'm actually more positive on Watkins than I am, for example, Verts. But again, Watkins, I was hoping for him to do better in game week 1. Next, we have Strand Larsen. Now, despite his 2 points, I'm really, really pleased with Strand Larsen's performance. He was playing City, so again, none of us should have been expecting points from him. But what I really liked about him was he was getting in the box, making himself known to defenders, very physical player. He had one really, really good shot on target, which arguably, if he'd pointed it left or right a bit more and not so much at the goalkeeper, he would have scored. That was a huge chance. And there was another one in the game as well, less clear cut, but also just showing us he's getting in the right positions. Then we have my bench. Nothing really of note here. Of course, we have Goodmanson, who is yet to play this evening. I'm recording this video on Monday, but no outfield players for me are playing. So let's move on to the next section. I just want to take a second to talk about Reijnders. We covered him a lot on this channel before Game Week 1. For those of you who went with him, great stuff. For those of you who didn't, please don't worry. Please don't make any panic decisions this week to bring him in immediately. He's not an absolutely essential own for the next game week. And the reason I say that is it's going to be very easy to move to Reijnders in future game weeks because of his price point. So as of right now, I would take next game week if you can and roll your transfer, just to look a little bit more at which players are emerging, which players are in form, which ones aren't, which teams are struggling. There's a lot more information and data we need to get before we start making any big decisions. So in a nutshell, if it's an easy move for you and there's nothing else for you to worry about in your team, there's no injuries, there's no potentially other bigger players to worry about, then a move to Reijnders this week does make sense. But if you're having to rework your squad to try and take out a big player like Fernandes or Verts to bring in Reijnders and leaving 4 or 5 million in your bank, I'm not sure if that's the right strategy at this point. Next up, let's talk about Game Week 1's heroes. Starting with, of course, Erling Haaland. What a performance. None of us are surprised. This is the player we knew he's always been. Nothing has changed in our thinking. Of course, Haaland would have been an amazing pick to have, but most of us couldn't afford both him and Salah. So the question now is, what do we do to get to Haaland? Are we going to gut our teams? Are we going to play a wild card in Game Week 2? How are we going to get to Haaland? However, I would challenge that thinking somewhat. I have reworked my teams 15 different ways over the last 24 hours, and I still can't find an amazing way to get Haaland and Salah in the same team without having to make major sacrifices in other parts of the field. So what I would suggest is let's see over the next few game weeks whether we can cover Haaland with our other players that we wouldn't otherwise be able to afford. Now, of course, the other debate is Haaland better than Salah now? So can we move to a team that only has Haaland and no Salah? That is something I might consider, but again, it's way too soon to be making these big decisions for our teams. I definitely don't recommend anyone plays any wild cards or takes any hits to bring Haaland in Game Week 2. Another hero this week, as discussed earlier, is of course Salah with 8 points. Then we have Semenyo. I really wanted to fit Semenyo into my team, but firstly, he was 7 million and I was looking for a 6.5 when I was trying to fit him in. Secondly, he had what I thought was a really bad opening fixture. Turns out that wasn't the case because he managed to get 2 goals. Now, of course, there's a bit of luck involved in that. I'm not suggesting we now target Liverpool's defence, but we did see Semenyo playing really, really well despite Bournemouth's difficult transfer window over the summer. So he's definitely one to watch for me. Then we have Anderson at Forest. So as I mentioned in some previous videos, Anderson is the slightly more boring version of Reijnders in FPL. Of course, that prediction pretty much came true. Reijnders was the higher upside pick with a larger ceiling, but Anderson is very, very consistent. And if I can find space in my team for two 5.5 midfielders, I might go for him and Reijnders. Next, who else but Chris Wood? Of course, he comes back into the season, scores a brace on his first game back. Of course he does, it's Chris Wood. I seriously love this guy as an FPL asset, and if you have him in your team, hats off to you. I still think it's a bit of a risk for me. I don't think I'll be moving there just because Nottingham Forest have just signed Kalimwendo amongst many other very interesting attacking signings. So Wood is one to monitor for me. If you have him in your team, obviously don't sell him. What an incredible player. Wait for him to start losing minutes before you transfer him out. But for those of us who don't own him, I don't know if we're trying to move to him yet or at all over this season. Let's monitor. Next, we have Kudus. So unlike his game just before preseason in the Super Cup, where he was playing as a second striker, in this first game in the Premier League, he was playing as a traditional right winger in a three-prong attack. So fantastic for FPL again. Would have been slightly better as a second striker, as a more central kind of player, because he'd be getting on the end of crosses and hopefully getting some goals. But in this position, he's fantastic for assists. I lost count of how many crosses he got in the box. He was really, really fun to watch. He ended up getting 2 assists for a total of 10 points. Absolutely incredible return, and makes me really regret not sticking with him in my final draft going into this season. But I am keeping an eye out for him, and I very likely will see him in my team within 5 to 6 weeks. Next, special shout outs for Kukureya, who got 9 points, Poro, who got 6, and Munoz, who got 5. Now for the next section. Now, normally for my Game Week review videos, I go over the Game Week heroes and the Game Week villains. And for this first video of the season, I wanted to do a special section on the new signings. However, I found that the new signings and the villains had a lot of overlap, so I've combined them together in this video. So let's start with Liverpool's new right back and new left back in Frimpong and Gyokeres. As I covered on this channel, they're both great assets, but what made me nervous was their minutes. And in their game, they were pulled off after 59 minutes, meaning both of them miss out on clean sheet points, and one of them, Gyokeres, was actually booked, so ended up getting 0 points. Frimpong got 1 point. This, in a nutshell, explains exactly why I don't like these type of assets. If you can live with the headache every single week that you might end up with 0 or 1 points because they get subbed early or didn't start, go for it. But for me personally, the upside of their ceiling does not make it worth having an asset like that in my squad. Next, Verts. I already spoke about him earlier in this video, so I'll keep this short. Basically, didn't pass the eye test, but let's see. Then we have Ekitike, who definitely did pass the eye test. And I'm not just saying that because he scored a goal, but also he was very, very involved in the build-up play, did really good number 9 work, and always found himself at the end of the cross. Now, João Pedro made me really nervous because of his effective ownership and the fact that I'd gone against him. But luckily he blanked, and to be honest, didn't look that involved in the game either. But from what I saw on the game over the weekend, he does not make me regret not having him in my team. Then we have Cherki, who didn't start, but came off the bench and scored, and Pep Guardiola in the press conference after the game said that he was instrumental. So we could see more of Cherki in future games, but again, I wouldn't be jumping on him just yet. Then we have Ryan Nori, who had an incredible game week with 9 points, including 2 points for defensive contributions. However, if you're thinking about bringing him into your team, please be wary because Vardiol is going to be back very soon and could absolutely affect his minutes. Next, we have the 2 new boys from Manchester United, Mbeumo and Cunha. Both definitely passed the eye test, very entertaining to watch. However, everything we said about them in preseason remains true. They're both still not on penalties, so their appeal from last year, for example, has waned a little. Secondly, they're playing for a Manchester United team that still hasn't got a nailed number 9. Man United played with Mount as a number 9 yesterday, which is of course not something we expect to see all season long. At some point, Šeško will come in and take that number 9 for himself. But while that happens, I'm not really sure what we can expect from Man United's attacking output. Finally, Casper the Friendly Ghost, i.e. Gyokeres. I'm not just saying this as a hater because I'm a Spurs fan, but he genuinely looked invisible in that game, and when he did get a hold of the ball, he looked really, really nervous. Of course, this could change. Many players need to adapt to the Premier League and might take months or years to do so, and that's absolutely fine. But as of right now, Gyokeres is absolutely nowhere near my FPL squad. And finally, I thought I'd leave you on a light note. If we're asking ourselves, can FPL get worse after my disastrous start?
It can't go on like this, can it?
It can.
Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.